I just bought a house and the ceiling was sagging in the living room. Old lathe and plaster over 2x4 joists, 16 Oc, spanning 17 1.5 inches. I'm not sure what they were thinking. We pulled the ceiling down and now have to decide how to proceed. For the most part, the ceiling supports land on the load-bearing wall at the end of the 17 span. However, there are a few extra ceiling braces that land on a 2x4 running perpendicular to the joists about a foot in from the wall, so at about 16. I was going to replace the joists with 2x8, 16 Oc, since that would leave the right gap between for easy insulation install. But, maybe that isn't possible with some of the ceiling braces landing on the 2x4s. Should I just sister the joists? If so, how do I deal with the sagging in the middle? One person told me to cut the sagging ones in the middle, rotate them up so the bottom is level with the new joist, and then nail it to the new joist. I'm a little under the gun timing-wise since my helper has to go back to work tomorrow. Please advise.
I can help. Let me read your question a bit closer.
Thanks.
This is just a ceiling, no occupancy or storage above the existing 2x4s, correct?
No. Just attic above, but I will never even use it for storage because I have a full basement.
Is there headroom that you could make it storage?
Plenty, but it is mostly above the load-bearing wall and close to that wall. The hatch is really small and awkwardly placed, so it would be a project to make this useful storage space and isn't a priority.
Before we get started, I'd like to point out that a professional engineer's standard of care typically includes a site visit to assess field conditions and get an overall understanding of the structure. This can obviously not be accomplished through the internet. The information provided here is meant for planning purposes only, general sizing and budgeting, and is based on the information provided by you. All loading cases considered are for vertical loads only, no lateral analysis has been completed. The information should be verified by a professional engineer who can visit the site to ensure that potentially important information has not been overlooked or omitted. Sistering would be the best. Do you know what type and grade of joists you can get?
Kiln-dried Douglas fir. I was going to go with 2x8 because that is what all the charts online list as the minimum for a span of 17 feet 2 inches. Not sure of the grade, but I told the place I usually get lumber, former wooden boat owner, and they said, all our ceiling joist lumber is kiln-dried Douglas fir.
Okay, let me run a few numbers. Just adding drywall back to the ceiling?
Yes, code here is 5/8 of an inch for ceilings. There will be a few recessed lights and 2 ceiling speakers, but that is all.
You can sister 2x8 DFL, number 1 grade, ceiling joists next to your existing 2x4 ceiling joists for a 17 span. I used a dead load of 8 PSF and a live load of on 10 PSF since you said the only access to the attic is through a scuttle that is very small. Can you just add the 2x8s and then remove the existing 2x4s? They are just adding dead weight, and if you jack them back to level, they will try to make your new 2x8 sag.
I think I can remove almost all the 2x4s. Except, there are 2 that have braces to the roof straight down onto the 2x4 in the middle of the room, and there are 3 or 4 that have some roof bracing coming down at an angle about a foot in from the interior load-bearing wall, about 16. Also, the rafters themselves are about 24 inches oc. I had originally planned to remove the 2x4s, but was worried about those ones that have braces to the roof.
I am concerned about roof bracing loads coming down onto the middle of the ceiling joists. Can you relocate the braces that just miss the bearing wall to actually land on top of the bearing wall?
Probably. It is strange because there are some braces that do land on top of the load-bearing wall and then there are these other ones that don't. There is a piece of lumber that runs across the joist right where those roof braces land. But, only those 3 or 4 joists. Not all the way across.
Hold on, let me get you a code detail. Attachment 2013-04-19-175420-braced-rafters.pdf full-size image. Here is the 2012 Irc Bracing Detail. Do you think you can relocate the ones that fall near the bearing wall to meet the 45-degree requirement?
This is helpful. Those braces I am talking about are purlins. And, there are no collar ties.
Also, on the braces that fall out in the middle of the ceiling, I would use a double 2x8 at each brace for extra strength. Those braces in the middle of the ceiling could be increasing the ceiling deflection.
That makes sense since they are pushing straight down.
What city and state are you located in?
Seattle, WA.
Okay.
Not really. Only a few inches, maybe once a year. None this year. And, it barely sticks for a few days.
You can always use a triple 2x8 ceiling joist for the braces that fall in the middle just to make sure. Lumber is cheap.
True. So, are we talking about leaving those braces on the 2x4 and sistering to multiple 2x8s? Or removing the 2x4 and replacing with 2x8s?
I would remove the 2x4 and replace it with a triple 2x8. Then make sure the brace will transfer load to all 3 members, not just the side of one of them.
Okay. How do I do that? Make it wide enough to land on all 3? Then, for the joists that do not have these crazy perpendicular joists, am I still replacing with 2x8 or sistering?
Attach a 2x plate to the bottom of it, that is the width of the triple 2x8, 4.5 inches.
Also, after looking back at our conversation, I think I better understand something. Those few purlins that are about a foot from the load-bearing wall. If I move their landing spot to right above the wall, the angle will be much smaller than 45 degrees. Maybe that is why they made them land where they did. Perhaps the roof needed bracing in that spot and landing a foot in front of the wall was the only way they could get 45 degrees.
On the rest, I would replace. The ceiling works with the new 2x8s alone. The sagging existing 2x4s will try and make the new ceiling members sag.
Okay, that sounds easier and cleaner. Does it matter that the joists do not line up with rafters in every case? The rafters are 24 Oc and the joists are 16 Oc.
Do you know the total length of the roof rafters the braces are supporting? Keep your 16 inches OC. Ceiling joist spacing, then add extra if the braces do not line up.
You mean, add extra joists to line up with where the current roof braces are? Right now, those all land on the 2x4s, so they should all land on the new 2x8s if I stick to 16 Oc.
That makes sense. If there is a slight angle in the brace, that is not a probel. Any more questions?
I was just consulting with my helper to see if there was anything else. I'm sure I'll think of something later, but I can't think of anything now. Off to the dump to get rid of this old ceiling. How do I attach the ceiling joist at the top rail if there is no rafter to attach it to?
Do you mean bearing wall?
On the exterior wall. Since the rafters are 24 OC and the joists will be 16 OC, they don't always line up. Online, it says to nail the joist to the rafter, but I won't be able to do that everywhere. I'm assuming on the interior bearing wall, I will overlap with the joist from the room on the other side and nail those together.
Yes, on the interior wall. They do not have to line up with the roof rafters. If they do not, just provide wood blocking to brace them in between the roof rafters.
Okay. I think this is enough for me to go get my lumber and get started. This is great. I was just so stumped on how to proceed and needed advice. Thanks.
Good luck with your project.
Thanks. Gotta run. My friend with the pickup is standing around waiting on me. Off to the dump. Hi. What I thought was a weekend ceiling replacement has turned into so much more. Welcome to home ownership, right? So far, I've rewired half the house to get rid of the knob and tube wiring that was on the old ceiling joists. I've gotten all the old 2x4 ceiling joists out and the new 2x8 ceiling joists in, 16-ish OC. There is now blocking in between every joist at both the exterior wall end and the interior wall end. And, there are recessed lights mounted up there and ready for wiring. I had a drywaller lined up, but he flaked, which turned out to be a good thing because my problem now is this: over the course of the project, I am increasingly concerned about my roof. The sag is quite concerning, particularly over the living room part of the house. From the street, you can see that the ridge is bowed a bit between the eaves, but there is also a sag over the living room. I'm not surprised, cause, now that I've had a chance to see my roof so clearly for so long, it is really poor carpentry. In our previous conversation, I mentioned the braces coming down from the rafters. I think the whole roof situation is just one cheap fix after another. I think that the roof was extended at some point, perhaps to enclose a porch and expand the living room. However, rather than replace each rafter with a longer one to cover the new span, they simply spliced another 2x4 onto the end, with about a foot overlap. Almost every rafter sags right where the splice is. The two pieces are not completely in line anymore, but have moved downward right where the connection between the two pieces is to make a very shallow V. That happens about midway across the living room span, which is about midway down the slope of the roof. I haven't actually measured the length of each rafter, but the roof ridge is about a foot before the load-bearing interior wall dot, so about 16 horizontally. As for height to the ridge, I can't say, but I can completely stand up and put my arms up under there, so it is at least 6 feet 6 inches or more. So, Pythagoras would say the rafters are about 17 feet 5 inches. All the crazy bracing that comes down to the load-bearing wall, bracing to about a foot in front of that, the two braces that come straight down, a purlin or two across a few rafters, seems to be an attempt to shore up the spliced part of the rafters. More important info: 1. I was informed by my inspector that I will need a new roof in 5 to 6 years if I baby it. So, I'm thinking that, if I can just stabilize the situation for now, in 5 years, I'll replace the rafters when I do the roof. By then, I can afford to hire someone to deal with it. Right now I can't. 2. That said, I am also totally aware that even if these rafters were each one big long 18 piece, the roof still wouldn't pencil out cause they are just 2x4s 24 inches ock. 3. I talked to a structural engineer, specializes in single-family residential, and he gave me a few options. One was to ignore it and just rest easier knowing that I made it better by upping the ceiling joists. I don't like that option, cause I'm looking at this roof and going, yikes. Second was to jack up the roof and install a cripple wall, but he said I should double up every ceiling joist if I do that. That is not appealing cause I already have the blocking in and I am not open to moving backwards to go forward. Plus, the joists aren't all able to handle a sister because some have the joist form the other side of the wall on one side and the rafter on the other. They don't always land on the same side of the joist. In fact, in most cases, they don't. Plus, I hate blow-in insulation and having joists smaller than 16 inches ock effectively makes that my only option. Third, was to jack up the roof and sister the rafters with 2x10s. When I talked to him, though, I neglected to tell him about the roof redo in 5 years. So, maybe I could get away with slightly less if my goal is to keep the roof from caving in for the next 5 to 6 years, keep the new ceiling joists from deflecting with all the bracing, and keep the roof sag from getting any worse rather than the goal of perfecting it now. In 5 years, I'll tear the whole roof off and just replace all the rafters with shiny new, much bigger ones. My friend says that we can build a knee wall up there across the joists without jacking up the roof, just shimming it at the eave ends, and that would be good enough to get me through the next 5 years. Or, we can jack the roof up and build the knee wall without adding extra ceiling joists, since it only has to hold 5 years instead of forever. Is deflection going to be an issue after 5 years? Any suggestions on how best to proceed? I know I just gave you a ton of info. Probably some you don't need and probably some missing that you do need. I'm leaving work now, but can get online tonight or tomorrow to chat if that is easier.
Can you provide me with some pictures of your trouble areas? That would help me a great deal to make sure I am visualizing your configuration correctly. You can attach them to the chat window with the paperclip in the toolbar.
Okay. Sorry it took so long. My camera is dead. I took pics with my phone, which does not have a flash. If there is anything you need to see more clearly, let me know and I can take pics during the morning this weekend when the light is better in the room. Wow, these pics look terrible compared to how they look on my iPhoto. Can you even see anything?
I have several items to discuss. 1. You said you provided blocking between your ceiling joists at their supports. You should also provide blocking at the midspan of the new ceiling joists. 2. Splicing rafters with a 1-foot overhang is a major structural deficiency that needs to be repaired. It sounds like you need to add a beam in the attic that will clear span between walls or posts and be directly under the one rafter splices. Then you can jack the sag out of each rafter and provide a 2x6 vertical strut that will rest on the new beam and attach to the rafter at the inadequate rafter splice. If you do this, you will not need to double up your ceiling joist to take the vertical strut loads because they will land on the new beam. How far would a new beam have to span in the attic under the rafter splice to be able to have its ends resting on walls? 3. From your pictures, the existing purlin braces look like they are at a flatter angle than 45 degrees and OB not providing much, if any, support for the roof rafters. 4. Your existing 2x4 rafters at 24 inches OC. are way undersized. If by chance you do get a freak snowstorm with some wet snow, very heavy, you do have the chance for increased deflection and possible collapse.
1. Okay. We'll do that. Thanks. 2. The span from the far side of the top plate of the exterior wall, Eve, to the far side of the top plate of the interior wall is about 150 inches. So, the top plates are 2 by 4, so that would mean about 7 inches less for the span, right? 3. I went and looked, and I think there are only 3 that are close to 45 degrees and they aren't under the splice, but much further up the rafter towards the peak. So, less than 45 degrees means they aren't doing much at all. Could I take them out once I put the beam or pony wall in? 4. Ugh. Not what I wanted to hear. And, of course, this is Seattle, so wet snow is probably the norm. I was talking to my friend about this pony wall / knee wall / whatever it's called and was just suggesting that we could have the end pieces of the wall come down to rest on the top plate so the wall wasn't just on the joists, but kind of more supported at the ends. Would that be as effective or as close to effective as a beam? My concern is getting a beam up there versus building a wall out of 2 by 4s. One seems like something my friend and I can handle, and the other sounds like something that needs way stronger people and a lot of maneuvering to get the beam up there between joists, braces, etc. God, this is so helpful. You are great. Also, I just looked up there and the spliced rafter thing is across the whole roof. The side over the living room seems to sag more, though, and I bet it is because the span of the room and the ceiling joist taking the load and being already undersized for the span, let alone for span plus roof load. On the other half of the house, the rooms are much smaller, so the span isn't so big. It still sags a little over there, but not as noticeably.
1. Good 2. The span used for calculations is actually the distance between the middle of each bearing area, so 150 inches plus 3.5/2 plus 3.5/2 equals 153.5 inches 3. I would leave them in, just in case they may be providing a small amount of support. 4. I grew up and worked many years in California, and the local mountains were notorious for getting snowstorms followed by rain, and the roof snow loads would become very significant. Since you have not drywalled the ceiling yet, you should be able to get some 13+/long 2x members into the attic without too much trouble. I would use 3 2x12 members to make a triple 2 by 12 beam that will span your approximately 13 and rest on the top plates of your walls. You can take them into the attic separately, then attach them together up in the attic. I would provide a triple 2 by 4 in each wall directly under the top plates where the new triple 2 by 12 beam will rest. Once the beam is installed, then you can build your knee wall on top of the triple beam and support your roof rafter at the splice locations. Keep in mind this will be a temporary measure until you can replace your roof, which has 2 small roof rafters. Experts are credited for each adequately rated answer they provide. If you have additional questions, please let me know. Thanks.
2. Okay, I measured to the far side of each top plate, not the inside edge, so then I think we need to subtract 3/5 from each one. But I doubt that changes the size beam I need anyway. And even if it did, if it is that close, I'd probably upsize anyway, right? 3. Okay, we'll do 4. Wait. I just thought of something. If the beam is running perpendicular to the joists, and the joists stick up above the top plate about 8 inches, how does the beam rest on the top plate? Do I add something on top of the top plate to make the top plate even with the joists? Also, the top plate. You said that I should add another 2x4 under the top plate of each wall where the beam is, so attach it to the studs on either side but under the top plate, not above the top plate? On the exterior side wall, the framing is exposed, so getting under the top plate is easy. And the spot where the beam will go is just above some framing around a window. There is a stud right above there that is above the window and then 2 very close together on the edge of the window. So, that span isn't actually very long. Does that change any of the instructions for the extra 2x4? On the interior side wall, there is lathe and plaster up to the top plate. Should I cut that away to get inside or add another 2x4 to the top plate all the way across? Thanks for your help.
2. Calculations are not that precise, so triple 2x12 is fine for. Just build up the top plates with 2x4s laying flat to create a bearing surface that is just above the top of the 2x8 ceiling joists. You do not want the new triple beam to touch the 2x8 ceiling joists. Yes, just like adding studs to provide additional support for the new beam bearing. On the lathe and plaster wall, sorry to say you need to open it up enough to add the extra studs. Can you send me any pictures of what you are describing about the window below where the new triple 2x12 will rest? I want to make sure I fully understand what you are describing. Thanks.
Oh, boo. I thought you meant to add a horizontal 2x4 between studs under where the beam will go. I didn't realize that you meant a new stud. Also, my friend with some framing experience that is helping me says I should tell you that there is a basement under this room. On the exterior side, the wall for the basement is in the same place as for the first floor, so the load would transfer all the way down, but on the interior wall, there is not another wall below. He says there is a beam running perpendicular to the floor joists in the basement ceiling right about where we want the beam to go in the attic. It has several posts supporting it along its length and go into the concrete slab. Darn. The 2x12x3 seemed so great until all this wall opening and window stuff came into the picture. I will send a pic later tonight or in the morning. I have to take off for an appointment right now. Thanks again for all your help.
Sounds good. Can you also take a picture down in the basement directly below where the interior post will fall? Talk to you later.
Not sure what is going on with the site, but it won't let me add pics. When I choose the pic, the OK button doesn't work. I'll keep trying. Website is being annoying. It won't let me add text to explain the photo. Of course, I made a whole PowerPoint with arrows and such, but won't let me load that either. Attachment 2013-07-28_185954 presentation 3.ppt. Is the PPT here? It seemed like it worked, but I just see a icon. And here's the pics of the base attachment, 2013-07-28_19232_basement_pics.ppt meant below where the beam/studs would be.
Thanks for all of the information. The key is that if you add the new triple beam, the additional load that will be carried by the beam will transfer to the top plates, then to the additional studs you will place underneath. And this load must have a solid load path to take the load all the way to footings or a slab in the basement. If the new triple beam fall over a window, then the header over the window needs to be strong enough to carry the additional load. If the load ends up falling on a floor beam below, then that floor beam has to be strong enough to carry that additional load. This has to be the case all the way to the ground. I know this is kind of generic, but that is the process you need to use to trace the load path to the foundation. I hope this helps.
This is really helpful. Frustrating that it is so much work for a temporary fix. It feels like I'd have to tear my whole living room apart, and just for a temporary thing. And, of course, if there is a window in the basement, too, then I'm tearing that wall apart as well to shore up the window. This is way more work than I can do, and I can't really afford to hire someone. I will barely afford the lumber at this point. Kind of tapped out from buying the place only 4 months ago. Pretty upset with my inspector right about now. He missed the roof and the knob and tube. What happens if the header over the window isn't strong enough? Does it start to cause problems right away or over time? For example, I have no idea how long the braces on the roof were pushing down on those 2x4 ceiling joists to make them sag. It could have been 50 years to get like that. In that case, it is tempting to say that 5 years of pushing down on the 2x8s isn't going to do much, and then I can tear off the roof and replace the rafters when I replace the roof. I guess I just have to decide. All your information is really helpful. Thanks for your help.
If the header over the window is not strong enough, problems will occur right away when the load is applied. The header will start to deflect, and if it deflects too much, it will start to affect the window operation. For strictly a safety measure, you can install the triple beam and build your knee wall. Just build the knee wall to just touch your roof rafters at the splice location, do not jack your roof up. This way you have a safety net. If you get any heavy snow loads, the roof will deflect and the new triple beam will help pick up some of the load and provide support at the inadequate splice locations. As far as the headers above your windows, can you provide a triple 2x12 or a triple 2x14 built-up member for those headers? That would be cheap and should be able to carry any of the additional emergency snow load conditions on a temporary basis. I hope this helps.
I hope they aren't selling their experts short.
Experts are credited for each adequately rated answer they provide. If you have additional questions, please let me know. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. The whole house was framed with 2x4, so the walls are only 4 inches thick. I could put 2 2x12s in there, if you mean that they should be with a 12 inches vertical. I think I also just figured out that the triple 2x12 beam should also have the 12 inches on the vertical plane.
Yes, the header members need to stand vertically. Since your walls are made of 2x4s, then you need to use a double 2x12 or a double 2x14 header with a 1/2 inch piece of plywood sandwiched in between. You need to glue and screw the 2x members and plywood together before you install them. Using the double 2x members and a 1/2 inch piece of plywood in the middle, you will get your 3.5 inches width that is needed. Good luck with your project.
Thanks so much. Is it okay if I follow up while I'm doing this in case I get confused on any of these instructions?
That would be fine. If you could rate my additional answers now, I will be available to continue to help you along the way. Thanks.
Yes. I tried to rate you, but it said I had to pay to rate you. Since I signed up for a membership, I thought I had unlimited questions for the month. I emailed the support team to see if that is the case or if I misunderstood the offer. I just wanted to check to make sure I'm not double paying. I'll rate you as soon as I hear back from them, even if I have to pay again.
Okay, sounds like a plan. Thanks for letting me know. Did you hear back from JustAnswer support team?
No. I did not. I called them this morning. They tried to tell me that the free trial I signed up for is only free after I pay $38 for a question. So, the free trial that they advertise isn't actually free at all. At this point, my free trial has ended, and my membership started today. And, this guy thought I should be able to rate you now, since I have unlimited questions with my membership, but the system still wants me to pay another $38 to rate you on top of my membership fee that I just paid. And, then I got mysteriously disconnected. Not happy with them at all. I will have to call back later as our server at work is down and I'm the office manager, so it is my problem to deal with. I will follow up with them by phone again and try to work this out. I want you to get paid, but I don't want to double pay if I'm supposed to be covered because I bought a membership. How do free trails and memberships work from your side of things?
I am really not sure. As an expert, the fee that you pay on each question gets split, JustAnswers gets half and I get half. So on a $38 question, the expert gets $19.
Geez. That is hardly anything. I wonder how the unlimited questions membership is supposed to work. I hope they aren't selling their experts short.
I do not know how the unlimited question process works. What does the unlimited question option cost per month?
Oh my God. These guys at support are a joke. All they seem to be able to do is regurgitate the information already on the website about membership and subscriptions. After 30 minutes, this is what I have found out. As far as they are concerned, this was a follow-up to an original question that I asked in April, and I already paid for that question and don't need to pay anything else. I explained to them that this was a new question, but that in order to get to the same expert and not knowing fully how this site works, I just responded to the earlier thread with a new question. So, she says tough cookies. Anyway, they said that if I want you to get paid, I have to start a new question and have you respond to that, and then it would get covered by my subscription. She was unable to tell me anything about how much you get paid under subscription. The fee for me is 5 questions each month for $38 per month. At this point, I am so annoyed with them that I just canceled my subscription and will just rate you here. I wish I had understood how this all worked before now. Sorry for any inconvenience. I'm starting work on the project tomorrow. It looks like the splice in the rafters lined up pretty closely with where the header beam in the basement is, so that is nice. I might not be putting support right under the center of the splice, maybe an inch or 3 off center, but it will be right over the beam. Luckily, I go into the interior wall through the closet so I won't have to tear down lathe and plaster to get in there to add the triple stud. And, on the other wall, there is just drywall, no lathe and plaster, so that is no biggie. It sounded like a lot of work at first, but now I think it sounds okay. Thanks again for all your help.
Sounds like a real mess. Thanks for your rating and bonus.
I started working on all this morning and already ran into a point for clarification and potential glitch in the plan. 1. It does not appear that the center point of the splice in the rafters lines up perfectly with the header beam in the basement. I could either put the triple 2x12 beam more towards the upper outer end of the splice, which would allow me to line up the triple 2x4 studs under the beam and directly above the header beam in the basement, directly where there is a post below that, 2, or I could have the triple 2x12 directly under the center of the splice with the triple 2x4 studs under there, but it would be about 6 inches or so to the north of the post in the basement. I was thinking that I would go with number 1, the braces from the rafters to the beam don't have to be perfectly perpendicular, right? So if there is a little slope, like 5 degrees, from center of rafter splice to beam, that is okay. What do you think? 2. I mentioned there was an old chimney right about where the beam would go. Well, I was working on removing that and I can see now that there is no top plate in the wall in that spot. The top plate ends just to the outside of the arch in the wall, right where the chimney starts. The chimney came right to the back of the lathe. There is a little closet behind the wall where I need to put the 2x4 studs, which is also directly below the chimney. The chimney went from right above this closet to about 2 inches lower than the roof. Should I just tear the chimney out and add 2x4s on top of the top plate to span the gap? I would have to add 2x anyway to bring the top plate higher than the ceiling joist so the beam can rest there. But, now whatever I put there will be spanning a gap instead of resting on the top plate. I am adding the triple 2x4 stud, which now looks like it has no top plate to join with. Is it okay to attach the new 2x4s over the gap and then run the new studs up to that and just have a little bump in the top plate? Or should I just rest the beam on the chimney, which is now just about at the right height for that? Except I do not know what kind of support the chimney has below.
1. The knee wall needs to come up under the rafters at the splice. The one thing you need to make sure is that the wall will support both of the rafters at each splice. From your pictures, it looks like the rafters overlap about 12 inches, so just make sure the wall falls within the 12 inches overlapping section. The wall does not have to be right in the middle of the splice. 2. Can you send me some pictures from various angles that show the chimney? Top of chimney, bottom of chimney, picture back a ways to show the whole chimney, 41,489.87785166667.
If you have a home improvement or appliance question and want to chat with an expert now, visit JustAnswer.com/YTHI.